This video will focus mostly on Nero. Here's a coin with Nero's face on it, and I'll show you other coins with Nero on it. He's famous for being the golden-haired child, so he was blonde. Reportedly to have freckles. He was also kind of larger, obviously, from that picture. Also, he squinted a lot, so he had problems with his eyesight. Claudius is his stepfather. Now, before Claudius and Nero's mother got married, Claudius was married to another woman, and he was worried that she was going to kill him, so he killed her and then married Agrippina. Ironically, Agrippina, who is Nero's mother, ends up killing Claudius, supposedly by using poisonous mushrooms. She does this so that her son Nero can take over the throne. Now, Nero is really young, about 16 years old. So Agrippina is really running the show here. She's really being emperor through her son. And we see this coin that's minted. And we see Nero on the coin with Agrippina. If you recall from another video, normally coins had emperors' faces on them. So the fact that Agrippina is on here with Nero and they're looking eye to eye, so they're equals, tells us that Agrippina really was running the empire through her son. Well, nobody likes people to know that your mom dresses you in the morning or that your mom wipes your nose. And so Nero gets kind of upset about this. Eventually, he gets tired of his mom trying to control him, so he kicks his mother out. She begins to favor Nero's brother or stepbrother, who is the actual son of Claudius. So Nero gets pretty nervous when that happens. So ask yourself, why is he getting nervous? Well, he isn't the actual son of the last emperor. So his stepbrother could actually become the emperor, and he's worried that his mom might help him do that. What's interesting about this coin as well is right around here it says Agrippina Augusta, the wife of the divine Claudius, right? On the reverse side, it has Nero's name. Here's another coin that came out after the first one that I showed you. This one has Nero with his mother still, but he's in front of his mother, showing that he's more powerful. And this time around them, it says Nero, son of the divine Claudius. So remember, Nero is nervous about his mom. There's some reason to believe that he's going to be overthrown by his mother and by his stepbrother. So what does he do? He gets rid of him. His mother, he tries to make it look like an accident. So twice he tries to poison her, and then once he actually rigs the ceiling so that it can collapse on her when she's asleep. But those don't work, so he has to send one of his goons over there to kill her. Nero also kills his wife so that he can marry one of his mistresses. He then, in a rage, kills that mistress by kicking her to death. He kills lots of people right around him. There was another time when there was a plot to kill him, and he kills about 20 people that he believes were part of that plot, and then banishes others. One of the people that he kills, his name is Seneca, who is Nero's trusted friend and advisor. Well, if you look at Nero's reign, once his mother, his wife, and Seneca, his advisor, are gone, that's when Nero really loses it and starts doing bizarre and crazy things. So the question is, was he always crazy? And were these people that were around him basically advising him and keeping him safe from himself? And when those people are gone, that's when he really loses it. That's when he goes nuts. Nero is famous as the Christian killer. There's a fire that breaks down in 64 AD, or breaks out in 64 AD, and it burns over half of Rome. The fire is so bad that many senators think that Nero should move the capital because it's impossible to rebuild. Not only does Nero not move the capital, he rebuilds the city, and he builds himself an enormous palace right in the center of Rome. It's called the Golden Palace, or the Golden House. Once he does that, people look at Nero as benefiting from the fire, and so he must have started the fire. This is similar to, let's say, President Bush after 9/11 going to New York and purchasing Ground Zero to build a Manhattan ranch. People would say that he planned 9/11 because he benefits from it. Well, I don't think Nero actually set the fire in Rome. In fact, during the fire of Rome, there's some evidence that he was doing a lot to help the people. He opened up his palace for the victims. But he benefited from it, and so there's a rumor out there that he actually started it. There's also a saying that he fiddled while Rome burned, and that's kind of an adage today, or a saying today, meaning that he didn't do anything during the crisis. You hear that talked about a lot in politics, that he's fiddling while Rome burns or something. And I'll show you a picture of what I mean in the next slide. But Nero gets all the blame for the fire, and so he needs a scapegoat. He needs someone to blame. So he picks those unpatriotic, unreligious, because they don't worship the Roman gods, Christians as the scapegoats. And they're perfect because, people believe that they would do something like this. So here's a magazine, The New Yorker, that I bought not that long ago. And on the cover, we see someone who looks like Nero, who's President Bush, we can tell from the podium and from his face. So here we see President Bush playing the lyre in front of a fire while Rome burns. So what this is talking about is, there's problems in our country, and Bush isn't doing anything to help out that problem. Bush isn't the only one to be accused of fiddling while Rome burns. I've heard people say that to President Obama, except the fire is different. For Bush, the fire was Katrina and New Orleans. For Obama, the fire is the economy. So it's a common metaphor that's used in politics quite often. Because Nero needed a scapegoat, he rounds up all the Christians and he kills them in very public ways. He kills them in the Colosseum. He kills them in the Hippodrome. Kills them even at his own dinner parties in his palace. And he kills them in violent ways, sometimes even literally feeding them to the lions. So the question is this good or bad for Christianity? This actually works out pretty well for Christianity, because many people in advertising would say there's no such thing as bad advertising. Any advertising is good advertising. So this is obviously bad advertising. Nero's calling them criminals, he's rounding them up, and he's killing them. But people now know the name Christian or Christianity. So think about it. He's killing them in the Colosseum. 50,000 spectators are watching. Kills them in the Hippodrome. 200,000 people are watching. And this actually allows Christianity to grow even more. We'll talk about that later in another video. Well, like I said earlier, Nero decides to rebuild the city after it burns. And he wants to build a city centered on art, on beauty, which is expensive. So how is he going to pay for it? Well, one is he taxes people. He taxes them into starvation. Another thing that he does is he steals from the temple. In Rome, whenever they conquer other people and they loot and they take their riches and their wealth, they also put a small portion of that into the temples as kind of a sacrifice to the gods, as a way to worship and honor the gods. Well, what Nero decides to do is go to those temples and just take the treasure out of the temple. So he steals from the temples. Another way that he pays for it is he goes to powerful people, rich, powerful people, makes them change their will so that they leave everything when they die to Nero, and then he forces them to commit suicide by threatening them an even more painful death, or their family members a painful death. So Nero also spends a lot of time out of Rome. He spends a lot of time in Greece. Well, what's in Greece? It's the arts. It's drama competitions. Nero decides that he wants to become an actor, a performer. He wants to recite poetry and write poetry, which is fine, right, in our society. We love actors. Who doesn't want to be in the movies? Who doesn't want that fame and that glory? We love our actors so much, we say, please, please be our president. Ronald Reagan was an actor before he was the president of the United States. Arnold Schwarzenegger made pretty bad movies, but they were very popular movies. But he made some pretty bad movies and some okay ones. And he became really popular to the point where he was elected governor of California. In our society, we love our actors so much, we want them to make decisions for us. We respect them that much. In Rome, actors didn't have the place in society that they enjoy today in America. Actors were at the very bottom of society. They were slaves and prostitutes. So when Nero says, hey, I want to act, I want to be on stage, he said he felt more comfortable on stage than he did on a throne, basically. And this was shocking to his subjects, to many of the aristocrats. It's hard to think of an equivalent today, but I think it would be fair to say that him saying that and him doing that is similar to, say, President Obama saying that he wants to be a Chippendale dancer. It would just be unheard of. It would be shocking. Well, Nero is gone, right? And so this gives time for people to plot against him. Entire areas of Rome, or provinces of Rome, start declaring their independence from Nero, and they don't support him as an emperor anymore. It gets so bad that Nero is asked to come back to Rome. So he comes back to Rome only to find that everyone hates him, basically. When I say everyone, I mean the aristocrats and Senate. And so the Senate declares him a public enemy, which means that he can be arrested and killed by anyone in the empire. Also, his guards leave him. And without his guards, there is no way for Nero to protect himself. He knows he is going to die, so he decides to control the way he dies, and he commits suicide. So that's in 68 AD. That's just 4 years after the fire in Rome. There's lots said about how he died and what he said right before he died. There's lots of different versions of what he said. Here's 2 of them. What a loss I shall be to the arts, and alas, what an artist is dying in me. Think about it. He is the emperor of Rome. He's the most powerful man. And yet when he dies, he doesn't say, what a loss I shall be to the empire. He doesn't say, what an emperor is dying in me. He says, man, I really had some good poetry left in me. Oh, man, I really had some great performances left. Too bad I have to die. Right? I mean, he just doesn't get his position. So why is Nero's death important? Well, he's the last emperor in the bloodline of Octavian. After this, the year that Nero dies is also called the year of the four emperors, because now there is no son to take over. Augustus never really set up a plan for this type of situation. And so 3 people declare themselves emperor during this time period, and they're all quickly disposed of. Then we've got Emperor Vespasian, and he comes to power, and he stays, and he kind of brings order. Him and his son Titus. It's that father and son that stop a rebellion in Judea. Titus goes into Jerusalem and destroys the temple there in 70 AD. About 60 years later, there's what's called the Diaspora, which is when the Romans, after another rebellion from the Jews, kill, enslave, or banish all the Jews from Judea. So it's called the Diaspora, the dispersion of the Jews. So Nero is the first one to persecute the Christians, but he's not the last one, and we'll learn about others.
But Nero was as much a victim of imperial power as its villain. His father died when he was only 3. He was brought up by his overbearing mother Agrippina, who had one ambition: to make her son emperor. The young Nero never shared her passion for the throne. As a child, he showed more interest in art than politics, but his mother deliberately ridiculed his musical talents. In 54 AD, at the tender age of 16, Nero became an unwilling emperor. He began by doing what emperors were supposed to do. He provided for the poor, building massive public baths and handing out cash to every Roman citizen. Rome, it seemed, was in capable hands, but whose hands were they? Agrippina still exercised a humiliating influence over her son. She minted coins that showed her next to the emperor. Nero was furious. He turned to the one thing he loved and thought he was good at: the theater. Yet Rome's performing artists were normally slaves, courtesans, or foreigners, never emperors.
How could one endure to hear, let alone see, a Roman, a senator, a Caesar, an emperor named on the program as a contestant? In putting on the mask of an actor, he has thrown off the dignity of his sovereignty. Cassius Dio.
When Agrippina joined the public outcry, Nero snapped. He immediately banished his mother from Rome. But distance did not solve the problem. Agrippina's repeated criticism incensed Nero. In a fit of anger, he asked the Praetorian Guard to silence his mother once and for all. Romans were appalled. It was their first glimpse of the emperor's brooding insecurity. Nero scrambled to resurrect his public image.
What Nero then does is a very dangerous experiment in playing to the people, because he plays in ways which traditionally have been defined as beyond the pale. To perform as a charioteer is definitely breaking all sorts of status barriers. And yet the charioteers are the pop stars of the day.
Nero's antics seem to have saved him. In 64 AD, a huge fire swept through Rome, destroying a third of the city. Half the population was left homeless. Nero's response was equally tragic. In the ashes of the devastated city, he built a massive 50-acre palace. His golden house had lavish gardens and huge lakes, even a private zoo. The emperor finally had what he'd always wanted, a peaceful retreat from political life. Rumors quickly circulated that the emperor had intentionally started the fire to clear space for his new palace. Nero panicked. He frantically searched for a scapegoat and settled on an obscure cult that had recently arrived in Rome.
Nero substituted as culprits and punished with the utmost refinements of cruelty a class loathed for their vices, who the crowd called Christians. Vast numbers were convicted and derision accompanied their end. They were covered with wild beast skins and torn to death by dogs, or were fastened to crosses and burned to serve as lamps by night. Tacitus.
Most Romans felt sympathy for the victims. Nero's propaganda exercise had clearly failed. Once again, he took refuge in his own artistic fantasies and set off on a singing tour of Greece.
The Greeks alone are worthy of my efforts. They really listen to music. Nero.
Not surprisingly, the most powerful man in the world won every competition he entered. The emperor bribed judges and forced audiences to sit through every performance.
No one was allowed to leave the theatre during recitals, however pressing the reason. We read of women in the audience giving birth, and of men being so bored with listening and applauding that they shammed death and were carried away to burial. Suetonius.
Romans were outraged by Nero's indulgence and incompetence. On June 9th, 68 AD, the Senate declared Nero a public enemy and sentenced him to death. But Nero chose a far more theatrical end. He took his own life. His final words,
What an artist the world is losing.
it was the end of Rome's first imperial dynasty. Augustus had ruled with restraint. Tiberius had ruled with indifference. Nero hadn't really ruled at all. The tragic demise of Rome's first imperial dynasty would echo for centuries to come. There would be emperors in Rome for another 400 years. But their dynasties would all rule with the same rhythm of power. Like Augustus, they'd start off promising the best of times. Their generosity would give Rome its grandeur. Their armies would guarantee the empire its peace. But like Nero, their reigns would end in catastrophe. Excess would undermine Rome's greatness. Delusions would condemn millions to die. Power and glory, the curse of imperial Rome.